supported by your gifts to the South Carolina ETV Endowment.
Thanks for having me, Betty. Charlie and I are thrilled and excited to talk about everything that the public media does and how our viewers are critical to bringing the stories of South Carolinians to the nation.
You know, tonight we have this opportunity for you to hear more about the programs like After Action, By the River, This Week in South Carolina, and so many more. And every program you watch with us is supported by community members who make a financial contribution to the ETV Endowment. So let's settle in to watch a special episode of After Action to get our night started. So Stacy, can you share with us a little about what we're going to watch?
Absolutely. After Action brings veterans from diverse backgrounds together to share their experiences, fostering understanding and empathy in a way that words can't achieve. Tonight's episode, Gold Star Service, is a perfect encapsulation of what we do and why it is so important. Join us in this mission by making a contribution today. Visit our website at scetv.org or call our toll-free number at 800-256-8535 or scan the QR code on your screen. Every dollar counts and brings us closer to our goal of a more connected and compassionate world. Thank you for being a part of After Action and the SCETV community. When a family loses a military member during service, they become known as a Gold Star family. It's a designation no one wishes to receive. My family did in 1944, 1945, and again in 1969. I'm Stacy Pearsall, retired Air Force Staff Sergeant. Today I'm sitting down with Nathaniel Lee, Shannon Duffy, and Joe LaPointe. 3 veterans who were compelled to serve after they became Gold Star survivors.
The car pulled up and the commander and the chaplain got out. I didn't know what it meant at the time, but the look on her face was that something terrible had happened.
I remember saying, "Hey, you need to get home, something happened to Shane." I think the shock factor of he literally just went back to Iraq. So I really thought that it wasn't him. It's gotta be a mix-up.
There was not a dry eye on the hill that day. It was, it was very emotional. We were all emotional about it, those of us that lost him. And this was 30 years later, and it was still affecting them to that day. You never get over it. You're never gonna get over it.
This is After Action.
There will be light. There is a road marching on, coming home.
Major funding for After Action is provided by the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For more than 40 years, the ETV Endowment of South Carolina has been a partner of South Carolina ETV and South Carolina Public Radio. With the generosity of individuals, corporations, and foundations, the ETV Endowment is committed to telling authentic stories and is proud to sponsor After Action.
At Dominion Energy, 1 in 5 new hires is a veteran. Whether called to serve or serving our customers, Dominion Energy is committed to supporting them and their families. They make our company and our country stronger, and we're proud to have them on our team.
Additional funding for After Action is provided by Home Telecom and Robert M. Rainey.
Joe, Nathaniel, and Shannon, welcome to Low Country Acres, and I'm really thankful that you had the time to come and sit down with me today. It's a very special topic because we're not only talking about you, but we're talking about a veteran near and dear to you. And so I want to kind of dive right into each and every one of your stories. Joe, I'm going to start with you. Where are you from, and how did you come about joining the Army?
I'm from Kettering, Ohio. I came to join the Army. My father before me went, and as is his dad did too. And wasn't a lot of prospects after high school, and I don't know, I think I probably had my eyes set on the Army before even that, so.
At 17, Joe LaPointe III enlisted in the Army in hopes of connecting with a father he never knew, but whose name he shared. A man who saved lives as an Army medic in Vietnam. Through his own service, Joe began to understand his dad's decision to volunteer for war and ultimately sacrifice himself for others. Nathaniel, what about you?
So I was born in Texas when we were stationed at Fort Hood. Then after my dad passed, we moved back to Northern California, where my mom's family all is. And both my parents were in the military. My dad passed. My mom had been enlisted in the Air Force when she was younger, like before they even met. And I always thought maybe I would want to go into service, but I wasn't exactly sold on it when I was 18. So I went off to college, didn't do ROTC or anything like that. But then by the time I was graduating college, I felt like it was probably my path. So I just walked into a recruiter's office in Mishawaka, Indiana, and said, hey, how do you become an officer? And they said, here's some paperwork. And then that was it.
In grade school, Nathaniel Lee used to tell classmates that his parents were divorced because it was easier than trying to explain that his father, Army Captain Donnie Lee, had died in service. Now serving in the Space Force with children of his own, Nathaniel strives to help other Gold Star children process loss as a mentor. What about you, Shannon?
I spoke to my brother who passed away in Iraq in 2008, but I spoke to him my junior year. I was supposed to go to college and play softball, but I knew that that wasn't really my route, so I asked him advice. He was Army. I only knew really Army and Navy. I was like, hey, I don't really want to go into, college. I want to do the military thing. Like, we had a lot of the same personalities. Long story short, he said, listen, promise me, try college and join the Air Force. I did fulfill his promise and went to college and kind of got up in the middle of a history lecture and was like, yeah, I'm doing what I want to do. And I went down to the recruiter's office and joined.
Though dissuaded by her family, Shannon Duffy felt the pull of military service after losing her brother, Army Sergeant Shane Duffy, during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Knowing the toll casualties have on families like hers, she decided to become an Air Force medic so she could treat the wounded and get them back to their loved ones. I think you all have something in common, and that is the fact that you're all a Gold Star family member. And I was hoping that you might explain to me a little bit about what exactly that means and maybe a little bit about each of your stories. Joe, you want to kick us off?
Sure. In May of 1968, my father, Joseph Guy LaPointe Jr., enlisted in the U.S. Army as a conscientious objector and would be trained as a combat medic. 1 month shy of his 21st birthday, he was killed in action in Vietnam and would become one of only 3 conscientious objectors in military history to be awarded the Medal of Honor. I was 5 months old when my father passed away, but I truly didn't understand his sacrifice until my later years. Being a Gold Star family member, I didn't even realize there was such a thing until maybe 10, 15 years ago, so pretty recently. When I was going through everything with my dad being killed in the military, and there was no support system there for like me and my mom. We didn't know the Gold Star was even a thing. And then I believe my mom got into it because she started working with the American Veterans Heritage Association, which is, at the time it was at the Dayton VA. And that's where she actually met other Gold Star mothers. And that kind of drove her into it. And then she dragged me along for the ride. And
Nathaniel, what's your thoughts on it?
My dad, Captain Donnie Lee, was an Army aviator, flying the AH-64 Apache. He was the Army Aviator of the Year in 1996, but in 1997, he was killed in a training accident. He left behind me, my brother, and our mom. Although I lost him over 25 years ago, his dedication to service and love for his family continues to inspire me every day. My story is similar to Joe's in a lot of ways. Certainly when my dad died, it was after the first Gulf War, but before the Iraq War. And so it was a time where there just wasn't a lot of military loss. And right when he died in 1997, it was like the entire base, the entire like 4th Infantry Brigade or 4th Infantry Division essentially like descended on our house because all his pilot friends and coworkers were also grieving. And then we finished out the school year and moved to Northern California, where I had the family support structure, but was totally severed from the military family. And it wasn't until my mom actually found out about an organization called the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And we went to their National Good Grief Camp, where I actually found like other kids who lost a parent for the first time. I realized that I wasn't the only Gold Star kid out there.
I think there might be a common misconception that Gold Star only encompasses those who were lost in combat. Can you clarify that for us?
Yeah, so my dad died in an aviation accident. So it's not just combat losses, it's really any type of loss, accidents, combat certainly, but toxic exposure, like any kind of loss of someone who served,
right.
Qualifies as a Gold Star family.
And I think also there's a misconception that Gold Star really only relates to, say, a spouse or a parent or a child. And so many Gold Star encompasses siblings too. Shannon, can you tell me what it means for you to be a Gold Star family member?
So, like being a Gold Star sibling, there is a phrase that's like the forgotten ones, or the ones left behind. I think after my brother being killed, it was you'd run into somebody, and it was obviously asking about his wife and his child or my parents. But for a while, it was nobody really checking in on the siblings. An organization in Massachusetts started a nonprofit that started to do sibling retreats. And like Nathaniel said, that was the first time me and my siblings were able to be around other siblings that kind of felt the same thing, or we connected with them and were able to talk about it. Obviously, being a Gold Star family member, we all understand that loss and the sacrifice that they made. But when you are raised with them your whole life and then all of a sudden they're snatched from you, it's hard to explain that. You learn how to ride a bike together. He taught me how to tie my shoes. So having that opportunity to meet other Massachusetts fallen soldier siblings and being like, wow, you actually, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. That was definitely helped me and my siblings with the grieving process and kind of coping with the whole idea of being a Gold Star sibling, never mind just a Gold Star family member. My brother, Sergeant Shane Duffy, served in the United States Army as an infantryman. While deployed in 2008, he paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country. I was only 18 years old, preparing for my senior prom, when I opened the door to the casualty officers. Growing up, I idolized Shane and certainly was his shadow. Not only was I his shadow, but he was also my best friend.
Oftentimes, you would be probably feeling grief or trying to process those emotions, and somebody would be asking you about, well, how's your mom doing? Instead of saying, well, how are you doing?
It was extremely difficult, and I was only 18 years old. When you run into people, obviously, you know that you're well known in the area, you're in the city. They're gonna ask about how you're doing, but almost, I wanna say 95% of the time, it was always, how is his wife and how is his kid? So for a little bit, you have a little resentment, almost but what about us? am I supposed to, I'm allowed to grieve, right? Like, this is my loss as well. Like, I'm empathizing towards his wife and his child and my parents, of course, but what about me? It's like nobody's remembering us and checking in or just expecting us to be able to be okay. Well, it wasn't your husband, and it wasn't your dad, and it wasn't your son. I was like, no, it was my big brother. He was like a second dad to me. Or he was my best friend. He was my sister's best friend and my brother's.
Joe, your story is so incredibly unique. So I kind of want to lean on you initially because your story, I would imagine, is kind of in reverse, where it was told to you in some ways. Can you explain that for us?
I was just talking to my mom the other day, and she was telling me she was reminiscing about where they got a telegram in the mail that said my dad was missing in action. And then 2 days later, officers showed up and said, no, he's killed in action. And that was it. That was 1969. It was 30 years later that someone from my dad's unit actually reached out to us. He said, hey, I was in the unit with Guy. Would you like to come talk to us? And she was like, sure, let's go see what's up. And I had a blast just talking to him and listening to his stories, you know, because this is the first time I've really had any contact with anybody from the military about my dad.
So what did you discover?
I just discovered what a great person he was all around. I mean, it happened long before the military. He was a sharpshooter. There's no reason that he couldn't go to war and kill somebody, but that was completely against his religion. And that's why he went in as a 1AO, conscientious objector. And they sent him to medic school, and he became a medic, and he was almost done with his tour. We actually went to Vietnam in 1999 with the guys that were left out of his unit. We walked up on Hill 376 where he was killed on 30 years to the day. There was not a dry eye on the hill that day. It was, you know, it was very emotional. We were all emotional.
When you went there in person, did it help you grieve, like to be able to see the location and kind of like, you know, see it, how it may have played down in person? Because
it did. We were there for a couple weeks, and we were there for about a week beforehand. And, you know, so the week beforehand, we're all getting acquainted with some of these guys I've never met before. And it was everything from infantry guys to the helicopter pilots and everything in between. And it was a long trek up through the mountains. You know, it was probably 3 hours, something like that, 3 or 4 hours, hiking until we go up this hill. And being up there with the guys that were there that day, there's no way I could ever get any closer to my dad than that day. So.
Nathaniel, what was that process like for you?
That day, in my memory, it's exactly like a movie. Like my brother and I were playing in the driveway, and the car pulled up, and the commander and the chaplain got out, and my mom came to the door and just saw them, and I didn't know what it meant at the time, but the look on her face was that something terrible had happened. And she told us to go down the street to the neighbors that we knew. And then the commander and the chaplain went in the house, and a little while later, we went back over and she gave us the news. And our lives were changed forever.
How overwhelming was it, too, to have so many perfect strangers relying on you to help them through the grieving process, and you were only 7?
Yeah, it was a really hard time. Because it was early December, so basically that entire Christmas season was just people at our house nonstop. And I can certainly understand why my mom decided to move us away, just because that was a really hard time for her, because she said she felt like she couldn't fully grieve because she had to attend to all these other people who are grieving. And then going back to school after the winter break, I felt like everyone's eyes were on me because the whole town knew what had happened. And I, for a long time, just wanted to pretend like it didn't happen and just like try to forget that my dad had ever even existed, because you're 7 and you just don't want any attention on you, especially attention that now you're the kid whose dad died. That first like TAPS Nationals Good Grief Camp, I was finally able to like share my dad's story with the other kids who lost siblings or parents.
Did you find it liberating to be amongst a tribe of people that understood it?
I did afterwards. At first, I was really apprehensive about it, especially just because this is, we're all the way on the East Coast from California, and it's Memorial Day, and I'm just in a place where I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want any more attention on it. But then by the end of the camp, I did feel really liberated, like you said, that I could finally honor his legacy, share his story, and then was able to go back home and be more proud.
Shannon, how old were you when your brother was killed?
I was 18 years old. I was actually getting ready for my senior prom. It was June 4th, 2008, and I remember running upstairs and being like, Mom, I don't have earrings to match my dress. And like, obviously you look back and you're like, oh my God. I was looking for earrings to match my dress. And 30 minutes later, I was opening the door to 2 casualty officers. And I was the one to open the door at the house. I remember saying, Mom, there's military vehicles outside, or government. The sedan had like a government plate. And my mom knew right away and screamed, don't answer the door. So she tells me all the time, she was like, I just thought that if you don't answer the door that it wasn't going to be reality. Excuse me. Thank you. I had to call my brother, my oldest brother, and like I basically just said, hey, you need to get home, something happened to Shane. He literally walked from Providence to our house, and luckily my aunt was driving by him and saw him, picked him up. Once everybody we had to wait there until the whole family. So that was the longest 45 minutes of my life. Mind you, my sister-in-law is an hour away. Stan already knows the news. She can't call anybody. He was just home like a week and a half prior. So I think the shock factor of he like literally just went back to Iraq. So for a while, I went to prom, I did it. Like, I really thought that it wasn't him. That was my mentality for a while, because we were like, he just went over there. It's gotta be a mix-up. But I always tell people that it literally changed my whole entire life. Yeah, I had an interest in joining the military previously, but after that, then I really had even more like passion to want to be in the military and understand what that camaraderie was, because he was injured. He had a hurt knee. He could have easily been like, I can't go back. It was bad. Like, he could barely walk. But I remember him always saying, like, I need to go back for the men on the left and right of me. Like, those are my brothers. It took me until I joined to understand that.
So it's interesting that all of you had a loved one who lost their life in service, and you chose to go down your military paths. Was there any sort of discovery along the way in terms of having a different appreciation or a different perspective of your loved one's sacrifice based on your own service?
Yeah, my dad was a medic, and I understand. He was supposed to leave for R&R the day after he was killed, actually. And his replacement hadn't shown up. So it struck a chord with what Shannon said, where he said, no, my unit's going out in the field and they can't go without a medic. I'm going with them. And they all said, no, you go on R&R tomorrow. You go to see your wife and kid tomorrow. He's like, no, you guys are not going out in the field without a medic. And ultimately that decision cost him his life. So
we've talked a little bit briefly about our stories, but like, as you guys tell your stories, I am relating more about my story as well. Like, Shane just got back. We ended up finding out that he just got back from leave. He was supposed to have more days to like recoup and stuff, but one of his buddies, he was trying to get home to see his child, you know, was just born, and he kind of took his place on that mission. And when you tell your story, it's like, that's literally exactly what happened to my brother.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I didn't understand it until I joined the military. Like, I got mad at my brother for a while. But now, like, once I joined, I was like, yeah, I would have done the same thing.
Yeah, I think there was some questions in my head at the time too. Is like, you know, why didn't he just stay? How come I had to be the kid that grew up without a dad because he wanted to stay? I don't understand why he wanted to stay, and it kind of made me mad, you know.
Right.
But then when I joined the Army, and you know, I went through basic training, advanced training, and even permanent party with a lot of the same guys. And you get to know each other better than a brother, sister, father, mother, anything. And, but you're relying on these people and they're relying on you. And, you know, it's just, you're their lifeline. And I completely understand why he stayed. I completely understand why he went on that mission. And I can't say I'm happy about the decision, but I 100% understand it. And I think that probably gives me my biggest peace.
I feel the same exact way.
Nathaniel, did your service change your perspectives?
It certainly gave me an appreciation for, like Shannon and Joe have said, how deep the bonds that you form with the people that you serve with are. Like your brothers and sisters in arms, friendship is almost not strong enough of a word for it, right? It really is that brotherhood and sisterhood that you form that I think you don't really get any other place other than the military.
So how do you keep your dad's memory as part of your children's lives?
We definitely talk about my dad a lot. You know, we have pictures of him around, and my girls both know that's Grandpa Donnie. And they know that I work with a lot of Gold Star families, and I explain to them, you know, when I was a kid, I lost my dad, so now I go and work with other kids who've lost their parents or siblings or aunts or uncles.
Joe, what do you do for your kids to keep your dad's memory alive?
Well, me and my mother give presentations about my dad and his actions over there, things like that. And we've done them at a lot of different veterans organizations, places like that, museums, and just try to spread the word. Anybody will listen to the story.
Shannon, don't you have an organization?
Yeah, so my sister mainly runs, and she does a phenomenal job with that. We talked about it. For me, it's just too close to home, and I don't think I'm ready to, like, you know, go back to like every single day. I help out as much as I can. So we honor him that way.
Nathaniel, you mentioned that you are invested in helping out with TAPS, and that the Memorial Day event is really great. Can you tell me like what exactly y'all do?
Yeah, so TAPS is a really wonderful organization that has given me and my mom and my brother just a priceless gift of a space where we can come and honor my dad's legacy with other Gold Star families.
So what are you doing at events like those? Are you doing like counseling sessions together, group therapy, or are you laying wreaths at tombstones? What are the events like?
So all of that and so much more. So the programming is really split into two sides. There's the adult programming and then the kids programming, which is primarily what I'm involved in. So the group side is classes and sessions and events and peer mentoring and all kinds of different things for Gold Star family members who are adults. And then the kids side of the programming is what's called the Good Grief Camp. And that is where each kid is paired one-on-one with either an active duty military member, a veteran, or someone else who was once a kid in the camp. And those one-on-one pairings are really the foundation of the Good Grief Camp.
So actually TAPS has been a huge part of my family as well. My niece was only an infant when her father, my brother Shane, was killed in Iraq. She's about to be 16 on September 11th, and she still has relationships with some of the kids that also shared the same loss as her through, she's been going to these camps since she was little. And whenever I see her with these other kids that share the same loss, even if they don't comprehend it fully, and I see how much fun and the lifelong friendships that I have, what TAPS does is amazing, and helping her grow and learn about her father and learn that she's not alone in this.
It sounds like it's been beneficial in a way to be able to comprehend what that camaraderie is in the military and why your loved ones made the decisions that they did to continue to put their lives on the line. And, and all of them laid their lives down for our freedoms for this country. And so every chance that I get, whenever I'm in DC or if I'm nearby any of the national cemeteries where my friends are laid to rest, I take my time to honor them, and every Memorial Day, of course, honoring them and always keeping them in my forethoughts. But to tell you the truth, and I'm sure it's same for you, every day is a day to honor and to live the best life that I can, because they're not here to do that for themselves. And so for everybody who, when Memorial Day comes around, I hope they're going to stop and enjoy their families that they have and enjoy the time that they have, and also those who have empty seats at those barbecues and take time to think about them. So I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing these really tough stories to share, but some that absolutely need to be heard. And I really, really appreciate your openness and your generosity. And also, thank you for your service too.
Thank you, Stacey. Thank you for having me.
There will be light. There is a road marching on, coming home.
What a moving episode. Wow. I'm Betty Jamieson, and if you're just tuning in, I am here with Stacey Pearsall, host of After Action, and Desiree Gordon and Addison Burgess, two of the veterans featured in the show. We're coming to you live from Columbia as part of the Public Media Giving Days, a campaign all about what public media means to you and how you make it possible with your donations. Stacey, Desiree, and Addison, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Betty. I am thrilled to talk about After Action and why it stays so close to my heart. It's all about empowering the voices of veterans and honoring their service. Through intimate conversations, we unveil the humanity, strength, and resilience that lie within each of their stories. We featured people from communities across the nation, including veterans from right here in South Carolina, like Desiree and Addison. Desiree, you were on season 1. Talk to me a little bit about what your episode was about.
Okay, well, I was invited to take part in the episode In Doc, which featured those of us who had a recruiting or a training position while in the armed services. Myself, I was a drill sergeant at Fort Jackson, and a big part of my job, my passion, was taking this group of recruits and turning them into a team. Creating that sense of community, that shorthand and trust is so important to everybody's safety, physical but also mental. And getting to talk about that aspect of my experience was incredible.
What I remember most about the conversation was how even though we all had different drill sergeants or different recruiters or even different branches of service, was that we all had a common thread, that sense of belonging. And like you said, it was that, oh, you get me kind of way that civilians may not always get right away. Addison, your episode hasn't aired yet. What can viewers expect to learn about?
Well, my episode, which will be aired on the 13th of May, is called God and Country. And it is about being part of a faith community within the military. I am a retired chaplain, so my role is unique in a lot of ways, but hinges on building a sense of community, that sense of belonging. Just like Desiree, though our methods are a little different, being a man of faith, when faced with any numbers of situations, can be challenging, but it's also can be honored at serving God and country.
Your episode also highlights the ways different service members practice their faith while in service. And it's something I don't think a lot of people really think about. That's celebrating holidays away from their families, needing special accommodations for religious purposes like food or ritual practices. But part of being an American is religious freedoms. So exploring what that looks like in action is so interesting.
Right. We want to be respectful to everyone's faith tradition as best as we can, even when we might be downrange or having limited resources at our disposal. But whatever resources, ultimately we want soldiers to maintain that connection with their faith, their families, and as part of my job is to protect that.
You know, I've never really considered what that might be like to have to think about all of that. And you know, really that's part of why After Action is so important, not just for our big military and veteran population here in South Carolina, but for folks like me who didn't serve but spend a lot of our lives with friends and families who did. When you watch or donate to After Action, you're not just funding a show, you're supporting a movement that's breaking down barriers and building bridges between veterans and the rest of society. So visit our website at scetv.org, call our toll-free number 800-256-8535, or even scan the QR code that's on your screen. Your contribution ensures that these important stories are heard and cherished for years to come. Thank you for being a vital part of the After Action journey. And Stacy, Desiree, Addison, thank you all for being here this evening. Any thoughts as we head into this next segment?
Yes, I just want to thank Stacy and the entire SCETV and After Action team for bringing military and South Carolina stories to the entire country. I was born and raised in Hemingway, South Carolina, and I feel like I've grown up with this station. So to be a part of a show like this, it feels quite amazing.
Yes, thanks so much for having us and keeping After Action going into our new season, which premieres on Monday.
It's such an honor to host this program and to bring light aspects of the veteran and military experience that aren't the stereotypical Hollywood treatment of what a veteran looks like or even how we think. Join us in our mission to demystify the military experience, to create connections, and to honor the sacrifices made by our veterans. To make your tax-deductible donation, visit the website at scetv.org. Call our toll-free number at 800-256-8535, or your other option is to scan that QR code on the screen right now. Together, we can ensure that these stories are heard, understood, and remembered. Thank you for being part of the After Action family.
Well said. Well, up next is By the River, and this episode features our very own Stacy Pearsall. So stay tuned for more from Stacy and the By the River producer, Dr. Caroline Sawyer, right after this.
My name is Hannah Merchant, and I am a Marine Corps veteran. I loved the book Shooter. It was eye-opening and it was raw. The pictures and the little tidbits that Stacy Pearsall writes in her story about combat experience was so heartfelt.
I'm Holly Jackson. Join us as we bring you powerful stories from both new and established Southern authors as we sit by the river.
Major funding for By the River is provided by the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For more than 40 years, the ETV Endowment of South Carolina has been a partner of South Carolina ETV and South Carolina Public Radio. Additional funding is provided by the USCB Center for the Arts, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at USCB, and the Pat Conroy Literary Center.
Hi, I'm Holly Jackson, host of By the River. Thank you so much for joining us. It is another beautiful day here at our waterfront studio in Beaufort, South Carolina. As part of our love letter to Southern writing, we are bringing you powerful stories from both new and established Southern authors. And this season, we are focusing on unexpected Southern stories and writers, and in today's case, photographers too. We are here with the author of Shooter, Stacy Pearsall. And Stacy, thank you so much for joining us. This is an exciting one because we also have with us a dog, almost asleep. Gosh, man, I already put him to sleep after just a few seconds. We'll get to that in a minute. But Stacy, thanks so much for making the trip here. And I say author, photographer, there are words, there are photos. Tell us a little bit about what this book's about and why it came to be.
Shooter is basically the bookend to my military career. I spent roughly 10 years as a military photographer and the latter part of my career as a combat photographer specifically, which took me all over the world. And on my last tour was Iraq, which was full of a lot of various experiences, some not so great. And when I came home, I kind of put the pictures away and tried to put the memories away, but I couldn't. I found one way to help resolve part of that was to bring the pictures back up, kind of go through my journals that I had taken while I was in combat, and sort of systematically and sort of cathartically go through these pictures and put them together into a book that is basically a way for me to close that chapter of my life.
Tell me the challenge there is, because, you know, me with TV, I'm used to video, there's moving pictures, but when you're talking still photography, you're trying to tell a whole story in one frame. Talk about the challenges of that and how you pick that one frame to tell the story.
Well, I think still photography can be a challenge, just like you had articulated. You have to be able to tell everything in one frame, and walking into situations where you don't have any control, combat being one of them for me. In this example, Shooter, you have to be able to be situationally aware enough to not get yourself hurt or those around you hurt, but situationally aware enough to know where the picture is going to take place, where that action is going to take place. Get out in front of it as much as you can and let the action kind of happen through it, and be experienced enough with the camera to know all the fundamental stuff like the ISO, the f-stop, the shutter speed, and timing and moment and expression and color and light, and hope that all of those come together in that 1/1000th of a second that you click the shutter.
Wow, that's a lot. There's some tough stuff in here to see. Is there anything that you left out, and if so, why?
That's a great question. I often get asked like what my favorite photographs are, and honestly, they're not in this book. And they're not particularly great either. I think I left those for the loved ones of the fallen, and it's the pictures of those who sacrificed everything in war that I cherish most. They are the last living pictures of these heroes, and I think those are the ones that mean the most.
Tell me about the therapeutic part of just picking the photos, compiling the photos, putting them, figuring out where they're going to go, and the stories, the part of the story that you're going to share. What did that do for you mentally, emotionally?
I think there were still some things that I hadn't really quite processed. Part of that is acknowledging grief, of sort of going through some of the unchecked emotions. I think there's a lot of things that we tend to push down for the sake of getting through the day in combat. And a lot of those resurface. And a lot of those, for me personally, are tied to each and every still frame that you see in this book. From the smell, the actions, the sounds, all of those are kind of attached to each picture, and the feelings. So for me, going through my archives and saying, okay, this was important for me to share emotionally. They may not be the best photos that I've taken, but for me, there are emotions tied to them. And a part of that was, again, acknowledging that, putting it into a book, and again, bookending those. And there was a lot of crying, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
A lot of anger, and just, again, these emotions that had been unprocessed that were coming through when I was putting this book together.
You referenced something that I feel like so many people can identify with. Anybody who's been through trauma or some really intense moments of grief is when those things happen, you want to shut down and get it away. But in order to move forward, you have to revisit. Mm-hmm. And so do you really feel like going back to the pain helped, in a sense, relieve the pain, if that makes any sense, to move forward and kind of you don't ever get past it, but to move on in a sense?
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because so many people are like, well, you just need time to get over it. And I'm like, you don't ever get over it.
It's always there.
Yes, for me, it's like these pictures, they'll live on forever. Mm-hmm. Those emotions that go with those pictures are still there. But the more I allow myself to feel them, the less overwhelming they become. Now, that's not to say that there are days that I don't get triggered and I can't control the emotions that come forward. But at least I kind of have the tools, whether that's through taking a long walk or hanging out with my horses, or, leaning on my service dog, Charlie, to help. But I think acknowledging that, putting it to paper, letting myself feel are all parts of the healing, and why that was so successful for me.
Besides healing for yourself, who is this book written for? Who do you think what's your target audience?
It's funny, because when I started on Shooter, it was never about a target audience. Mm-hmm. It was about getting myself healthy, or at least starting down the path. And I didn't know just how therapeutic it would be for others, particularly for those who've been to Iraq,
right?
Who went through the book and they were like, oh man, this really resonates with me, or this brought up a lot of feelings that mm-hmm. I haven't felt in a long time. It was also a tool for therapists, some of them, to have this book on their table to allow some of the folks that they were working with through post-traumatic stress to be able to visualize and have a better visual understanding of what we went through. And maybe perhaps the words that they couldn't find, the veterans that are working through these things, the words that they couldn't find were better articulated through pictures. Now, there are pictures and words in this book, but I think for some of us, pointy talkies can be a lot easier.
Sure. Yeah. How often it's been some time since you've put the book out. Mm-hmm. How often do you go through it and do different emotions come back whenever you do?
It's funny you ask that, because I very rarely crack my book now, because again, it was for me a book end on trying to not shut it out, but be at peace with it. And part of that is not like bringing up the war again over and over again. Now these pictures, I processed a lot of those emotions. They still live with me. They're in my mind and my brain, in my waking life and in my sleeping life. They come in through my dreams, not always in the greatest times and not always happy moments for me in my sleep. I think that's the worst time. But in terms of the book, it used to give me tremors. It's just thinking about the pictures and how they are. Now I can pick up the book and say, okay, this was so and so, and this is what we did, and we can talk. Right. Yeah. So it's helped a lot.
Okay. This chapter, so to speak, of your life is over, but what do you feel like your mission is? Because in a sense, it's still with you. You're still, talking about veterans and working on a project right now, After Action, which will be on public television. So why do you continue to live through something that does cause you pain?
Yeah. I think for content like this that is difficult, not only to look at, but to talk about, the last thing we as those who've experienced it want to relay that to somebody we love or care about, because we don't want to traumatize you with what traumatizes us. And I think it's important to have that dialogue so that you can better understand what keeps me up at night. Maybe why I'm kind of grouchy the next day, or if I'm angry out of nowhere, maybe I'm not angry at you, but I'm angry at what's happening to me or something that triggered me. So it's all about communication, whether it's through pictures or words or a conversation like we're having now.
I think this conversation is so important because, we're talking about mental health, and so many people watching can identify, not exactly like you, but in some facet of their life. So I think this is a great time to introduce Charlie. Yeah. Wake up, Charlie. I know Charlie doesn't listen to me anywhere like he listens to you, but tell us who Charlie is and what kind of, how important he is, what his role is in your world.
Oh, stretch it out, Charlie. Good boy. Well, it was about 2017, and I was traveling a lot with the Veterans Portrait Projects, which I had begun during my recovery phase after coming home from war. And I was taking on a lot of stress, wasn't sleeping, and wasn't processing a lot of things, and was very guarded about telling people. And in the meantime, I was overworking myself. I had traumatic brain injury I was trying to work with, and I had a grand mal seizure, which was a wake-up call. And I knew I needed help. So I applied for a service dog, got on the wait list. And actually it was in 2015 that I had applied, waited. 2017, Charlie and I got paired. Yes, good boy. So Charlie does a number of tasks, probably more than I would ever need, to help mitigate some of the things that I find hard to do when I'm having side effects of traumatic brain injury. So I get dizzy and I get vertigo. So Charlie will help balance. So he has a balance command. He'll pick things up off the ground if I'm too dizzy to bend over and get it. If I have a seizure, he can go and ask somebody to get help for me. He can retrieve my keys, my shoes. He can go turn on light switches in the dark, push and pull doors open and close. He's fantastic. One of them.
I love the way, I wish the camera could show how he's looking at you, because he's like, keep talking about me, keep talking about me. Good. He's enjoying that. It's just been a real miracle to your life, it seems like.
Yes. I think the number one benefit that Charlie brings to me is reassurance and independence. Prior to getting paired with him, I had anxiety, not just about things I was going through with post-traumatic stress, but also about having another seizure in public, having to rely too much on other people. I have always been a very independent person, and suddenly my disabilities were forcing me to stay at home for fear of having to ask for help. And Charlie's my new battle buddy, for lack of better words. And he's non-judgmental. He's always there when I need him. And he has the sweetest face. Can I have a kiss?
He really does.
Thank you. Okay, sit. Good job.
And follows commands so beautifully. What I really love about the show is that we don't just talk about the book. We talk about the author, what got you to the place that you are to write the book. And I feel like viewers kind of become connected to that and become interested in the book. There are more books. And There's one that follows and another one that you're currently writing on. Can you just kind of give us a little snapshot? Gosh, all these puns. I'm really not meaning to tell us what those are about.
Well, let me frame that up for you.
Oh, yeah. Good job.
So I have a photojournalist field guide, In the Trenches with me, Stacey Pearsall. And it was a book that many, particularly women, asked for, but those who are working in conflict zones or high-risk environments behind the camera. And it was just everything that I had learned over the years, things that I had gleaned from other combat photographers prior, all the way from the Korean War, Vietnam, and to present day. And just kind of relaying it all and putting it in a nice little package in one book and putting an emphasis on things that women face particularly, which was not addressed in so many other books like it. And I felt that was really important. I also am working on putting it all together about my life to date. I know I'm only 42, which seems ludicrous that I would work on that autobiography, but
But you've been through so much in a short time.
Yes, it's jam-packed. I'm even having to cut things out, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, that's something that I'm working on now.
And back to the therapeutic part, I'm sure that getting that out too has been good for you. Tell me about the people you've met along the way who have maybe read this book. We talked about some of the veterans, but have you made some relationships and connections with people because of the book?
Yes, actually. So one of the soldiers that I served with was friends with another soldier. I mean, we're in the military. There's always this Kevin Bacon game where somebody's connected to somebody.
Right. You're all connected somehow, sure.
Right. One of the soldiers that is featured in this book was friends with another soldier's wife, and she wanted to get the book for him as a gift. And so she bought the book. It turns out that she's a Gold Star wife, which means her husband died in service. He died in Afghanistan. And she reached out to me, and we got to talking. And I told her that I had struggled with connecting with the Gold Star wives of the soldiers that I knew that we lost in Iraq. And so through this book and this offhanded connection, she and I began this relationship, perfect strangers, and talking about how I could resolve that part of this undealt thing in my life.
Sure.
And she gave me the strength to begin to reach out to the Gold Star wives and make a connection. Actually, I made pretty good relationships with most of them in the intervening years after that. So I'm still very good friends with this particular gal too.
Very good. Very good. All right. Talk about, you said that people ask you that, what is your favorite picture? Now, as a former news reporter, that's always hard when somebody says, what's your favorite story? Like we gotta go down, like, my favorite funny story, my favorite tough story, whatever. So I know that's a hard question to answer, to bring it down to one, but let's show some that really stand out. Is there a page number that you remember or anything that you think we can particularly talk to?
I'm just going to steal this for a minute.
And what age? You said you're 42 now. You kind of got a baby face in these pictures. How old are we?
Well, I'm 27 on my last deployment.
27. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So these pictures where you're featured, you're in your late 20s.
So okay, I'll give a backstory on this particular picture.
Okay.
We were out on a routine patrol, passing out candy and clothing, soccer balls to some of the youth in the area, just winning hearts and minds is what they called it. But we ended up getting attacked by some of the insurgents and got into face-to-face firefight with them. And I was up doing my job, taking pictures, and one of the bullets ricocheted off a wall and hit this soldier right in the groin. And all the other soldiers were pretty busy engaging the enemy. So I put my camera down and started to render first aid. And so he's off to the side, and he's standing up bleeding from the wound in his groin, and I'm there treating him. Well, back about a block is somebody from the BBC taking pictures for the UK. And the next thing I know, there's video of me rendering aid to a soldier.
Dear.
And it's a very, very, it looks bad.
Right,
It looks bad. But anyway,
So
it was
that's
something
one story.
brevity, something
Yeah.
that we have in combat, things you can laugh at.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in. You should chuckle a little bit. But anyway, we came back. He was fine. Luckily, it was, like I said, it was just a ricochet. He got a laceration, bled a little bit, but he lived. But he came home, smoked a cigarette, glad that he still had all of his parts.
Yes,
That's one little story for you.
I'm glad we have some humor here. Okay, and so how about any connection with anyone featured in here?
Every one of them.
Okay, so I mean, I'm saying still today, like, do they know that they're in the book?
Yes.
Okay, talk about that part.
Well, this particular soldier right here was the one I was talking about.
Okay.
Whose friend's wife reached out to me and got that conversation started. You're actually on a page right there. This group on the left-hand side.
I love this, by the way.
Yeah, we're all sitting around having lunch with Iraqi soldiers and a military transition team during a patrol.
Okay.
And in that picture, my video partner is sitting there eating alongside many friends that I still am in close contact with today. One of them is an Iraqi national who was born in Iraq and was our translator during that deployment. He eventually sought asylum in the U.S., is now a U.S. citizen, and serves in the Army. He was on my show After Action as well.
Nice. How would you sum up your time? If you had to, just kind of give someone the 15-second rundown of your experience overall and what it was for you, how would you describe it?
If I could simmer it down, it would be 50 minutes of boredom punctured by 10 minutes of sheer terror.
Wow. These are good. How many pictures do you think you took a day?
I know in the end I had about 500,000 images that I've taken.
500,000?
Yeah.
And we're talking about a span of how long?
My time at combat, well, maybe a combat camera may have been a little bit more than that, but my combat deployments around roughly 500,000.
Okay. And to bring it down, the book's pretty thick, but whenever you give me that number of images, how do you bring it down to that to tell the story? How did you decide what makes the cut?
Well, luckily this was just one deployment, so that made it
That
a
brought
little
it down
easier.
a little, sure.
And again, I think I wanted to share a certain, I guess, part of that life, and wanted to make people know that it wasn't just about the times that the bullets were flying. Yes, combat is bullets flying. It is that 10 minutes of sheer terror. But there is the 50 minutes where you bond with perfect strangers. You put your life in their hands and they put theirs in yours. And those times are filled with laughter, with grief, with the mundane. And those moments, I feel, are lost on the majority of people. Because it's those moments that bind us so tightly together that we would fall on our own sword to save another person's life.
And Stacey, we've talked about so much during the show about mental health and about therapy and healing and PTSD. These are things that aren't always talked about in this field. Do you feel like it's part of your mission to make that commonplace, to speak of it? And if so, why?
Absolutely. And I think it all starts with my own experience. Because when I came home after getting injured in Iraq, I had a lot of things emotionally that I hadn't dealt with yet. And that was delaying my ability to physically heal from my injuries. And it always baffles me why it's so taboo to talk about mental health in the first place. Because we will openly talk about what ails us physically, but it stops there when it comes to emotions. But we all have something emotional that we've gone through in life, whether that's postpartum after giving birth, or perhaps we lost a loved one or an animal we care about that touches us emotionally, and maybe we have a hard time recuperating from that. So why not have the tools to be able to talk about it? And, you know, at some point, we have to be able to express that, whether that's through words, pictures, conversations, or finding ways to help ourselves find the tools to carry that with us in a way that it's not going to burden us so much that we end our lives. Because I want to talk about suicide for a second. I recently lost a fellow combat photographer and friend to suicide. And that was just on the heels of another combat photographer friend of mine who killed herself. At some point, it has to stop. And we can't do that unless we talk about it openly. And we can't do that unless we support each other in having those uncomfortable conversations. So it all starts with this, talking.
Stacey Pearsall, thank you so much for sharing this story. It's so important. We're talking about the book Shooter, a compilation of images and short stories that go along with those. So we appreciate you coming for By the River. And thank you all for coming and sitting down with us for this episode of By the River. I'm your host, Holly Jackson. We'll see you next time.
Major funding for By the River is provided by the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For more than 40 years, the ETV Endowment of South Carolina has been a partner of South Carolina ETV and South Carolina Public Radio. Additional funding is provided by the USCB Center for the Arts, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at USCB, and the Pat Conroy Literary Center.
Welcome back to our live Public Media Giving Days celebration. I'm Stacey Pearsall, host of After Action, and I'm here with Dr. Caroline Sawyer, Associate Professor of Communication Studies at the University of South Carolina, Beaufort, and of course, Miss Danielle Cobbs, By the River's student intern. Thank you both for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for the invitation. Not only am I the producer of By the River, but I get to hang out with you on the set of After Action, where I work as a location manager. So what a great occasion for us to come together and to be able to talk about both productions tonight. As you mentioned, we also have Danielle with us, and Danielle, while a senior, just graduated from the USC Beaufort. This past year, she was able to work on By the River as part of her course load, working on the studio production. She also just finished up this semester working on the After Action website.
Yes, I am so fortunate to be a part of Dr. Sawyer's class, getting to take part on a national show that highlights South Carolina in such a positive light and gives incredible authors the chance to share their stories with us.
I can certainly attest to both aspects as one of those lucky authors that you just saw, and as someone who values storytelling on a very deep level. After Action and By the River share that common thread, the importance of sharing individual stories and building that empathy for others. By contributing to the ETV Endowment, you're doing more than just donating to a show. You're preserving these untold stories for future generations. Your support helps us continue to uncover countless narratives, opening a window into the lives that might otherwise be lost, whether they be veterans, authors, South Carolinians, or all of the above. Make a difference by donating now. Visit our website at scetv.org, or you can call that toll-free number at 800-256-8535. Better yet, scan that QR code on the screen. Your contribution ensures that these important stories are heard and cherished for years to come. Doc, as the communications professor, what does access to public media mean to you as we celebrate tonight, this Public Media Giving Days?
What a great question, Stacy. I didn't start my career in public media, but I'm so glad to be here now. Stations like SCETV and SC Public Radio provide an invaluable service to our state through local and national news and reporting. Programs like ours, By the River and After Action, shine that light on stories that make up our great state and beyond. And by doing this in a way that every citizen of South Carolina can access it, it's hard to overstate the importance of this. And I think that's the epitome of public media's access to great programming. And with By the River, that access is even more apparent as our students who work as interns on the show get to work on that nationally broadcast show and get that experiential learning that we know makes such a big difference in the job market and in the skill building. In fact, we're leaders in this arena, providing a model for collaboration and excellence, really the epitome of educational television. By the River started 7 years ago, and we started as a local show, an idea after we were working with ETV to create this partnership, and I said, let's do a television show. And that television show has grown to a national broadcast at a school that's only 2,000 students. And so we're now airing our third season and prepping for our fourth season. So that right there is just truly the epitome of a great relationship with public media that gives access on multiple levels to people in our state.
And I have to agree. The experience I am gaining right now will give me a huge advantage when it's time to enter the job market. I get to do so much that so many other students might only get to read about, and it's all made possible with viewer support.
Before we head to our next segment, I want to thank you both again for joining us tonight and for all that you do to highlight Southern storytelling. To become a member of ETV Endowment and to support programs like these, visit the scetv.org website, call our phone number at 800-256-8535, or you can scan that QR code that's on your screen. Your donation, no matter the amount, is an investment in the legacy of South Carolina and the education for generations to come. Thank you for standing with us and preserving and sharing invaluable stories through After Action, By the River, and so many more. I just want to thank you guys for everything that you do for After Action, for having me on By the River. Our shows really celebrate not just South Carolina, but bring South Carolina to the nation and continuing education. And with the support of ETV Endowment, and of course the contributions to our viewers, we couldn't do it without them and couldn't do it without each and every one of you and interns who are going to take charge and take the lead from us when it's time. So up next, enjoy this episode of Citizen Better, a PBS digital studio series helmed by SCETV and hosted by KJ Kearney, who will join us in the studio.
Food has always been political. The meals we eat and the people who make them are all part of a cycle of reciprocity. Food brings us together, gives us nourishment and care for our community, and gives us opportunities to feed back into our community's future, as long as we keep that cycle going. If you've ever spent time arguing over who's allowed to bring the potato salad to the cookout, or whether sweet or savory grits are better, and if you said sweet grits, you're wrong, you know that nothing gets people more fired up than the food they eat. But why? Food is more than how we nourish our bodies. It's how we share our histories and traditions. It's how we care for the people around us. It's how we express our identities and our values. The food we eat is who we are. But can food be a form of activism? My name is KJ Kearney. We're in Charleston, South Carolina, and this is Citizen Better. When it comes to being civically engaged, not everybody feels like they can start a nonprofit or run for office or even march in the streets, but everybody's got to eat. So why not get involved in your own community by doing something you have to do every single day? We went out into the community to find out how people were doing just that, which is where we met Nicole, a realtor and small business owner in the Charleston area. Why do you think it is important for people to support Black-owned businesses?
I think it's important to support Black-owned businesses because there's a disparity in income and the amount of money that Black people make. I own a Black business, and I know that it's more difficult to get business. The number of people that I'll have access to that will want to do business with me, people tend to want to do business with someone that looks like them.
Now, as it relates to restaurants, right? What do you think would have been a better way to make sure that that business sustained over time?
When you support a Black restaurant, you don't have to support it just one time. You can go again. Add it to the rotation. We're not saying don't support other businesses. Just add Black food, Black restaurants, Black-owned restaurants to the rotation. The food is seasoned.
The food is seasoned?
Hello.
That is good. There are a lot of people who have tried to support more Black-owned restaurants since the pandemic and Black Lives Matter uprisings of 2020. But using food to fuel social movements is nothing new. During the civil rights movement in the 1960s, organizers gathered over restaurant meals, protested segregation at lunch counter sit-ins, and even funded the movement with under-the-radar bake sales. Georgia Gilmore was on her way home from work as a cook at a Montgomery, Alabama cafeteria when she tried to take the bus. The driver yelled at her for boarding through the front door, but when she got off to board at the back, he sped away. Miss Gilmore was one of the many Black Montgomery residents who faced discrimination in the city's public transit system and were already organizing to make a change. They called themselves the Montgomery Improvement Association, and together they organized Black citizens to boycott buses, arranged mass carpools, and raise money to keep the operation going. While many organizers joined neighborhood fundraising groups, Georgia Gilmore started one of her own, the Club from Nowhere. This group of anonymous women made home-cooked meals and baked cakes and pies to sell at Improvement Association meetings, in beauty shops, even out of their own homes, raising hundreds of dollars each week to pay for the gas that kept the carpools running. Miss Gilmore and her Club from Nowhere not only funded the 381-day boycott, she also gave many home cooks a concrete way to support the civil rights movement, setting the example that even baking a pie could be a political act. But not everyone can cook for free. What if you're an entrepreneur who wants to both sustain your family and support the community around you? What could that look like? And would it make a difference? Founded by community activist Kevin Gray, Railroad Barbecue prides itself on its smoked meats and traditional barbecue sides. But it's their mission that takes a page from the Club from Nowhere blueprint. You see, Kevin Gray believed art and culture are at the core of building stronger, more civically engaged communities. But at the time, Black artists were rarely supported, so he had an idea to change that. Sadly, Kevin passed away, but his legacy is now being carried on by his daughter, Camille. One of the things that struck me when I came in here is every single inch of this place is covered in a photograph, some sports paraphernalia. What was the inspiration behind that?
My dad his degree is in political science. So he's always been in politics since a young age. He always loved art. So, a lot of this was his personal collection.
I've traveled all over this nation, going to Black restaurants. I can't say that I've met a Black restaurateur that also has an art center attached to it. So let's talk about that art center. What is the goal of this art center? Why do y'all have this in the first place?
Create a space. Because if you think about it a lot, and even in the schools now, they're taking a lot of that away. Art, music, so you're not allowing people to be creative. That's important too because, how do we depict, our society? We use pictures, we use artwork. So, and a lot of times we wouldn't have any of this if we don't have any artists.
And for Camille, maintaining a strong bond with the community is an essential part of the railroad mission.
You want to always preserve the history of your neighborhood regardless of whatever else is going on around you. So we want to be conscious of the people who are still here and the people who are gone.
If your patrons wanted to be more civically engaged, how would you encourage them to do so?
Just start at the register and support the artists. Come back and make sure that you give back to the community.
We've seen how food can be used as a tool to empower communities. But what happens when a small Black-owned restaurant faces an existential crisis? Between February and April of 2020, 41% of Black-owned businesses closed, at more than double the rate of white-owned businesses. But businesses that survived were also less likely to receive financial support from the Paycheck Protection Program. The same businesses that brought communities together pre-pandemic were hanging on by a thread in isolation. Then, another crisis hit. The 2020 deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor ignited a new wave of urgency into the Black Lives Matter movement, and individuals across the country were hungry for ways to take action. Calls to buy black spread across social media, and even in the midst of tragedy, many businesses boomed. People showed that when everything was on the line, they already knew their favorite local joint was bigger than just a restaurant. For spots like Gilley's, it was validation that their community-first approach was right all along. Owned and operated by Chef Shawn Mendez, Gilley's Seafood has become a staple in James Island, South Carolina. The restaurant is both inspired by and named after the most influential person in Chef Mendez's culinary upbringing, his grandmother, Larice Gilliard. So while Chef Mendez serves up a mix of both Gullah Geechee and Creole fare, blended with traditional Low Country favorites like shrimp and grits, he came up with a unique way to bring community together through the power of collective memory. I think of food as a tool of liberation. I think of food as a tool to help communities. I also think of food as a political thing.
You know, my dad always told me, don't ever talk about politics and religion with people. So I try to keep that out of it. But I think, like most things, the way you live is a testament to who you are, and I let people make their decisions from there.
So now, even if it's not seen as political in your eyes, it sounds like you do think of it as a communal thing, like it's almost like community engagement in a sense.
I believe so, because we always try to do as much as we can for the local schools, because again, it goes back to treating your locals and your people around you. You set roots where you are, and you water everything around you, and that just bears fruit.
One of the most defining aspects of Gilley's Seafood is the Grandma Wall, where customers from all walks of life are invited to hang up photos of their grandmas in honor of their own respective family food traditions, something Chef Mendez knows is extremely important. You mentioned your grandma taught you how to cook and you learned basically at her feet. How important is it in your mind to have this generational connection so that these recipes get passed down to future generations?
If I don't pass down what I've learned, then it dies with me. Gullah Geechee culture is where it is now because we have passed it down. But it's gonna be difficult because of where we are as a society now. Everything's fast and quick, and how fast can I get this and do that? If you have kids that love to eat, well, show them how to cook it, because that's gonna go further for them in the long run than letting them go out here and spend money on food that's not even good for them.
Sounds like an ideal way to keep building on our shared food history and respective communities for generations to come. It also sounds like a perfect way to citizen better. I'm KJ Kearney, and thanks for watching.
Welcome back to our live Public Media Giving Day celebration here in the SCETV studios. If you're just joining us, I'm Betty Jamison, one of your hosts for this evening. And joining me right now, we have Andrew Davis, a producer on our digital team here at ETV, and KJ Kearney, host of Citizen Better. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. So KJ, tell us a little more about the episode that we just watched, which was great.
Thank you. And absolutely, I'm excited to be back here in Columbia talking about Citizen Better with y'all. The show just started in January, and it's about helping people find ways to be more civically engaged in their everyday lives. And of course, since it's a show made here in South Carolina, we had to start with food.
Food, oh boy, yes. Food is such an integral part of culture and community. And as you pointed out during the program, it can be really powerful. It can bring people together, create a shared language, and of course, provide nourishment.
Exactly. And like so many art forms, there are countless ways to expand on tradition, pass down knowledge from one generation to generation, and build a legacy. And thanks to the folks at PBS Digital Studios and SCETV, I get to tell that story nationwide.
That's right. Isn't that great? Just like After Action and By the River, which we touched on earlier tonight, this is a show that is distributed nationally, supported by donations to the ETV Endowment. Your gift during Public Media Days supports shows like these and countless more. So give us a call at 800-256-8535, visit scetv.org, or just scan that QR code on your screen right now to make a gift. Now, KJ, your show is distributed through PBS Digital Studios. So can you kind of give us an idea of where viewers can see these latest episodes?
Absolutely. All of our episodes are available to stream online at pbs.org or on the PBS app or scetv.org. And while you're there, you can even make a quick donation.
That's wonderful. And, you know, tell us a little bit about what's coming up. I know you have some in the production mode that you're going to be working on. So tell us a little bit about the topics and some excitement about this series.
Absolutely. When we started this show, we really wanted to do something about sneakers. Sneakers is a passion of mine. We changed things up, but fortunately, one of the upcoming episodes is about mutual aid. And we're going to be talking about mutual aid using sneakers as a way to speak that language, kind of bridge that gap. We're also going to be visiting a young lady in Rock Hill who has her own community fridge that anybody in the community can add food to or take food away. We got a lot more surprises, but that is an episode, that mutual aid episode, that's something I'm really,
and that's
really
coming
excited.
Up pretty soon?
Absolutely, yes ma'am.
What else? What else is on the burner?
I can't tell too many secrets, but I will say that we do have something very special. If you're from Charleston, you might like one of these episodes we have coming up.
Okay, well, I'm not from Charleston, but I did work there for a time, so
Fair.
I will be excited to see that. So will you, so stay tuned. So speaking of the website, and it's great content you can find there. Andrew, as part of the digital team at SCETV, what are you all working on?
That's a great question, Bet. We just launched the 4th and final season of From the Sky last month, and now we're gearing up for Curiosity Trek's first season in just a few weeks. We even brought the first episode tonight to watch together.
That sounds exciting. That's wonderful. We're getting so many sneak previews tonight. You know, that I really love that. I do. So, Andrew, what about what's coming up with Citizen Better? You want to tell us about that?
And just like Citizen Better or After Action, our digital first series are made possible through donations to the ETV Endowment. We get to explore the rich history of South Carolina and tell the state's stories thanks to donors and members.
You both make digital first series for South Carolina ETV, digital first series. So what's the advantage of a digital series versus a traditional broadcast show?
That's a good question. For me, it's how quickly we can move. Broadcast shows can take months to produce and make it to air. And for the subjects that we're covering on Citizen Better, that might mean that some of what we share is out of date or irrelevant by the time people see it. Digital is also limitless. There's only so many hours in the day for shows to be broadcast on television, but having streaming means that we can tell so many more stories and embrace a wide range of experiences, not only in South Carolina, but across the globe.
Oh, I agree. Our team has multiple shows going at any given time, but if we were broadcast first, we'd have to scale way back. That means less exploration, fewer voices heard. It'd be completely different.
Okay, so you said your team has a lot going on at different times.
Yes, ma'am.
You are producing this show we're going to watch. Tell us a little bit about what's coming up and what you're working on.
Well, Curiosity Trek is a show where I travel throughout South Carolina and I highlight artifacts of either historical value, things that are cool, weird, bizarre. If you're on a road trip or if you're in a museum, anything that could make you do a double take. But the one that we're about to see tonight is actually in a place that's not publicly accessible. We had to have some assistance from the Department of Natural Resources to get out there. The first episode is on the shell rings down off the coast of Edisto.
And people don't know about those. Those are so interesting. You know, what are they there for? How did they get there? What were they used for? It's really interesting.
And that's exactly what we explore in this first edition.
Wow. So what else do you have kind of on the burner there coming up? You thinking about some other shows?
Oh, absolutely. The second episode, which premieres after the first one, is on the B-25 bomber out at Owens Field Airport by the South Carolina Historic Aviation Foundation.
Well, that's neat. So really the diversity of topics, you're really thinking about anything that has some historical value to South Carolina. And that's important because these stories, that's what ETV does best. We tell those stories of South Carolina that you might know a lot about, but you're going to learn more, or you might not know anything about. But you can come to your public television station, your public media station to learn about this. And what these guys are talking about, these are the digital series that don't air on ETV, but they have a digital format that you can get online. But tonight, we're getting to view these here on our broadcast network, so you're getting a sneak peek of what's coming up and what you can access later digitally online. So, KJ, tell us a little bit more. What about the effort that goes into this?
Right. And I want to be clear. Just because I said we move kind of quick on the digital side, that doesn't mean that we don't put the same effort or care into our shows. That's not what we mean at all. But digital does give us the room to play with the format, with the genre, even how long the episode is. So it's pretty freeing.
So it's like when you're out there, you can make it whatever length it turns out being when you're talking to people. That is pretty freeing because like this show, we have a certain amount of time that we can talk to you and invite you to become involved with your public media station. So they get to have the freedom to produce this kind of content for you. And it's special tonight because you're getting to see it right here broadcast on ETV. But later, you can access it online anytime. You know, I really love what you said about that. And I want to thank you both for joining us. You know, it's great to hear what's going on here, Andrew, with ETV and the digital area that's taking place behind the scenes that people just don't know about. I didn't know about a lot of it, and I'm here some of the time, but it's so good to hear about that and see how I can go online anytime I want to access this content. And you're based down in Charleston,
Absolutely.
KJ?
The great state of Charleston.
But you're covering the whole state?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
So how do you think up these stories?
Well, we have a big team of people, and what we do is we think about the topics that matter, both from a civic engagement standpoint, but also ways we can demystify things. So our whole thing is trying to pull the wool from over people's eyes so they can understand the political process a little bit. And that's the whole title of the show, Citizen Better, right? We want people to citizen just a little bit better after each episode. Go out there and do something tangible to change their community.
That's a great mission. I like that. Say that one more time. You want people to citizen better and go out there and
just become a little bit more civically engaged every day.
And you're doing that throughout our state.
Absolutely.
All this is happening behind the scenes, folks. And this is all on your digital channel, you can access online. You're sitting at home and you can do it anytime you want. You don't have to wait on ETV to broadcast these programs because they're right there at your fingertips. So stay tuned. You know, I really love getting to learn all about this myself. And thank you for joining us, KJ and Andrew. That was a great conversation. And really, while you're there online, why not make a donation to support the shows you love online and that are broadcast? Scan the QR code on your screen now to make a gift, or you can always call us at 800-256-8535. Now, let's enjoy the series premiere of Andrew's, the one he talked about, Andrew's Curiosity Trek.
Anyone who has flown over the Edisto area of South Carolina may have looked down and noticed these unusual ring-shaped structures in the marshes below. What are they exactly? How did they get here? Who put them there? Find out on this episode of Curiosity Trek. Mysterious ring structures. The remains of ancient civilizations such as these dot South Carolina's coastline. Edisto, in the Low Country, is the home to 3 unique ring structures. This particular cluster is called Fig Island. But what are they? They were constructed by Native Americans thousands of years ago. I'm your host, Andrew Davis. Today, we will dig a little deeper into the history of these shell rings. But first, we had to make the trek down to Edisto. Adding to the challenge, the rings are no longer publicly accessible, so we needed a little help from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources to get there. From our home base in Columbia, South Carolina, it's a 2-hour drive to make it to Edisto. Upon our arrival, we embarked on a 15-minute boat ride out to Fig Island. Even after our boat landed, the journey wasn't over yet. To see these rings up close, we had to trudge through over a mile of dense forest and ankle-deep mud. Like a scene straight out of an adventure movie, we weave through vines, avoiding various species of spiders. With the help of our guide, South Carolina Department of Natural Resources agent Sean Taylor, we arrived at our destination. These shell rings, what are they?
That's a good question. We don't know. We don't know if they're ceremonial centers. We don't know if they're habitation centers. We don't know what their purpose were. There's more than 26 of them on our coast. Just a few miles of here, there are several. There are 3 rings here at Fig 1, 2, and 3. Fig 3 is a crescent, Fig 2 is a hexagon shape, and Fig 1 is a series of rings that make up a big complex. They're made up of oysters and tons of other shellfish, every shellfish species you can think of. Through excavation, we will recover from each ring. Doesn't seem to be a big difference in species diversity between rings. The wonderful thing about the shellfish is it's allowed for the preservation of a lot of other stuff. The flora and faunal remains that we get in shell rings are really incredible. That's something that we don't get on other sites. The rings primarily tell us about their foodways, what kind of resources they're collecting from the natural world, and they're eating everything that moves, swims, or flies, and things that don't move. Our rings in South Carolina tend to be circular or crescent in shape and tend to be about 200 to 300 feet in diameter. Some of them are very low, but we think that probably has to do a lot with agricultural practices in the 19th century when they were farmed. Raw oyster shell was used as a building material for tabby. We see that happening a lot, so we think that some of the rings have been depleted in that way. So you get rings that are only a foot or 2 in height, and unlike Fig here, which doesn't appear that to ever happen, Fig 2 is about 6 to 7 feet in height and 250 or so feet in diameter. The rings in South Carolina, one of the oldest rings we have is here on Botany Bay Heritage Reserve on Pocky Island, and it's around 3,300 years old in age, and Fig Island is a little bit younger than that. And rings, all the rings are comparable in that ballpark, 3,300 years in age.
Now, out of all the materials available to these Native Americans, why did they pick oysters of all things?
I think it's their abundance in the natural world. They're just so abundant. Then we've looked at historic maps to see how abundant our historic oyster beds were, and we've seen that we don't have the oyster populations today that were here even 200 years ago, and much less 4,000 years ago. So they were just here for the taking.
In order to build a massive shell ring, it would take millions of oysters consumed over a long period of time. Thankfully, when you have a whole village of people all eating the same food, it doesn't take near as long to accumulate the number of shells to build a ring like this. Well, once again, thank you for taking the time to come out here and share these fascinating facts, Sean.
Absolutely, anytime. I enjoyed the day.
Although some unanswered questions remain about the true purposes of these rings, perhaps further archaeological studies will reveal more clues. We hope you enjoyed learning about these captivating structures at Fig Island. What do you think they were for? I'm Andrew Davis, and we'll see you next time on Curiosity Trek.
What a fun and fascinating show there. Hi, I'm Bradley Fuller, host of Sonatas and Soundscapes on South Carolina Public Radio. And thank you so much for joining us tonight for this live broadcast of Public Media Giving Days. If you haven't made a donation yet, not to worry. You can give us a call right now at 800-256-8535. Visit SCETV.org or scan the QR code on your screen to make a gift. It's been an incredible evening with lots of great guests and sneak peeks. And to help us close out the night, we've got Gavin Jackson, host of This Week in South Carolina and the South Carolina Lead podcast. That's LEDE, as we like to say. And of course, President and CEO of ETV, Adrian Farewell. Gavin, Adrian, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited about what we're doing here tonight. It's been a great reminder for all of us that these incredible shows that you're seeing, we create right here at SCETV. And we're proud to provide PBS programming to South Carolina, of course, but this is a reminder of what we do right here for our local communities here in the state of South Carolina. We do our own storytelling, and that's great because whether it's telling the stories of South Carolinians or we're behind the cameras as South Carolinians. And so we're excited about that tonight.
That's right. Yeah, we really do a lot here, Adrian. And of course, and you can see the same with our newsroom, of course. We'd love to tell the stories of South Carolina. We have dedicated reporters who live and work in these communities. I live right here in Columbia. We have folks that live in Charleston, Rock Hill, all across the state. And having those local reporters on the ground really help provide the context. You know, we're not parachuting into places, have no idea what's going on. We have people on the ground who can add context to reports. I mean, I'm thinking of Victoria Hansen when she was covering the Alec Murdaugh trial, right? She lives down in Charleston. That was in the Low Country. She gave that context. We have Scott Morgan up in Rock Hill providing some coverage for the upstate, and we have a great team right here in the Midlands.
It really is, yeah. Just means a lot to know that people who are invested in their communities and living the life, as you were saying there, Gavin, are bringing these stories to their fellow South Carolinians and have these kinds of roles to play and stories to tell. So.
Absolutely. That's the context that we're looking for. It's the context that can make a story resonate with our viewers and our listeners. Watching you, Gavin, cover the presidential campaign, it was so fascinating as we had two South Carolina personalities in the race. And because you've been reporting with us for about 7 or so years, you could get access to those campaigns. And I think that being on the trail with them made it incredible.
I know, I realized this week actually is my 13th year in South Carolina. So I'm a transplant like many of our viewers are. So if you're new to South Carolina, please give and support us because our coverage does come at a cost. I mean, like Adrian was saying, I was in Iowa and New Hampshire multiple times last year and this year covering some big names in South Carolina. We had some prominent folks making it pretty far, and we rely on the donations from viewers and listeners so we can chase and develop these stories that are so important, right? A lot of commercial stations aren't doing what we are doing. We have the ability to devote resources and invest time in these stories. So if you're ready to make an investment, scan the QR code on your screen right now, visit scetv.org or call 800-256-8535 to make your donation. And we've also been so fortunate to have time and resources to do truly great reporting, like I was saying. You know, when I first came to ETV back in 2017, I said, oh my gosh, I was coming from the print world. And now here we are in the TV world. I was never going to be a TV guy, but public media is so different, right? Because you have the time, you have the context. This week in South Carolina, we have 26 minutes to tell the important news of every week. The Lead, the South Carolina Lead, we have up to 30 minutes. We try and keep it short because people have short attention spans, but we want to educate and inform folks. And, you know, like we're talking about Victoria Hansen down in the Low Country and Scott Morgan, he had a deep investigative look into consumer debt in South Carolina on the podcast Indebted. We have Russ McKinney and Mayan Schechter keeping track of the legislative issues at the State House. We have just 3 days left of the legislative session. We still have a lot to do. We're going to have a lot to keep up with. It never ends. It never ends. Like you said, it has a cost too.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's all made possible by viewers like you. And I know we say that all the time. I love saying that, but it's true. You watch this channel every day. You invest your time in our station. So why not take the next step and donate tonight?
You know,
we don't take that lightly. Not to cut you off, Bradley. What you said, they've got the wrong theory here. But we don't take that lightly. We do say that all the time. But for us, it's important for you to understand and know that your voice matters, and it matters through the gifts. It matters through your time and attention and engagement with us. Because we try to tell the stories that are reflective of the communities that we serve, and we do not take that job lightly.
Absolutely. And you know, to this point of it's viewers like you that put it on, there's kind of been a meme floating around. I've seen it maybe on Instagram or some other sites, but, you know, it says, when PBS says made possible by viewers like you, or public radio by listeners like you, and I feel so proud. That's me they're talking about. Well, yes, this is your chance to be one of those people. And actually, we've already had some great responses come in from people all around the Palmetto State. In fact, in the Tar Heel State as well, our Carolina's really showing the support. Lynn in Pawleys Island says she loves the music programs, like Sonatas and Soundscapes, maybe. Wait, Don't Tell Me, and the news, and is excited to get a new car decal. And I know, Gavin, you sport your car decals on your ride, so that's a great way to show your support for this station. Nancy from Hilton Head appreciates that honest reporting that we were just speaking about. And Caroline from Charleston says she listens to NPR for hours each day and give support to different stations in different locations, that she's recently moved to Charleston and wanted to add SC Public Radio to her sustaining commitments. So every gift to the ETV endowment is not only a financial commitment to SCETV, but is really a vote of confidence in the stories that we tell here. So you can be like Lynn and Nancy and Caroline with your gift now. And we certainly thank them for their support, and we thank you for your support. So 800-256-8535 is the number to call, or southcarolinapublicradio.org, of course, if you're on the radio side of things, and of course the QR code on your screen. News, entertainment, education. I think we like to say information, entertainment, and inspiration. That's really important too. We don't take that trust for granted, because you're watching right now. You believe in this mission and the vision of SCETV. And I think it's safe to say that you, the viewer, are the mission and vision of SCETV.
Absolutely. We do not take that commitment lightly. We don't just air the programs that we personally want to see, but we make the content that reflects the immense wealth of perspectives, and that's what makes South Carolina so unique.
Well, I often refer to SCETV as a kind of public radio library, or a public library. I'm on the radio end of things, so I'm often thinking about radio. But TV and radio itself is this kind of library with so many resources in it. I remember walking into my university library when I first started and just being kind of overwhelmed that I would never read all the books inside. Even my nerdy self would never get to all of these volumes on the wall. But it's knowing that there is one program, one show, one bit of information that's going to speak to your lived experience, to your interests as a viewer, as a listener, that will resonate with you. And maybe there's one that won't resonate with you, one that doesn't quite match with what you're expecting. It's not exactly what you were anticipating, but I think there's something wonderful in that too, because that offers a tremendous opportunity for growth, and that can really be the situation where you learn the most. So sometimes those shows like that, where maybe it's a piece of music on Sonatas and Soundscapes, and you're thinking, what is Bradley playing today on the show? This isn't Haydn and Mozart. This is a little out there, but sometimes those things that aren't as familiar can really be a great learning experience too.
I agree. I love that analogy, Bradley. But I take it even one step further. When I think about the programs that we produce, they're either mirrors or they're windows. Mirrors in that you see yourself and your community represented, and in windows to experience the lives of others. Both are so important, so unique. And we know that good storytelling, regardless of format, leads to more empathy. And in this world today, that's something we could all use more of.
That is definitely something we could all use more of. And I hope that Sonatas and Soundscapes is a window, as you mentioned, into music history, into what I call the wide and wonderful world of classical music. Yes, maybe it's what you wanted to hear. Maybe it's something a little more offbeat, but maybe you hear it and think, wow, this is transporting me or taking me back. I've had listeners reach out to me and say, I remember playing this at Interlochen Arts Camp, or maybe Leonard Bernstein conducted me for this piece, and it just took me right back to this performance. Whether it's familiar territory, something that takes you way back in time, or maybe something that's all new, it makes that connection, and it really helps to build a larger community of music lovers, public radio listeners, ETV viewers, countless people having that common language and experience across lines that aren't always so easily crossed. Music can really bring people together, and this media resource can do that too.
Yeah, I wish I had a fun metaphor too, but our goal, I like to think maybe a window into your ear, because when we're talking about the South Carolina Lead podcast, It's a way of understanding and caring about politics, right? Because a lot of times people hear politics, they just immediately tune out, right? A door is shut. I want to open that door. We will. And of course, and sometimes people feel like they've got left behind the news. And that's what the Lead's there for. You can tune in every week wherever you find podcasts, the South Carolina Lead. Now, Adrian, I know you have something to say, too.
Yes, your shows are very different, Gavin,
Yeah.
for sure. But that through line of understanding and building community, it's powerful. And it's why they both fit, Bradley and Gavin, into our mission. We recently had StoryCorps here at South Carolina ETV, and this is a clip from their visit here with us.
StoryCorps is an oral history organization. It started back in 2003, and StoryCorps has 2 archives, an archive at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., as well as an online archive. So the goal of StoryCorps is to help people across the United States record their stories, their histories, and then preserve them for future generations. And the mobile tour is a program within StoryCorps that brings our Airstreams that have these mobile recording booths, and we go to different communities across the United States.
I think it's different in each city that we've been in. This is my 5th stop so far with the tour. I feel like it's been really fun so far. We've been here for just about a week. I feel like the people are really welcoming. It's been really nice. We've had a pretty full schedule here, so it's been fun seeing like the enthusiasm that people have had for coming in to record with us. That's always exciting.
You can sign up for either an in-person or virtual appointment. When you come, you're going to be greeted by a StoryCorps staff member, a facilitator, who's going to guide you through the whole recording experience. And usually what that entails is onboarding information, and then you record your conversation with your partner that you brought in. And afterwards, the facilitator is going to walk you through the options of how you want to share the recording. So that's another thing that we really like to share with folks about the StoryCorps program, is that we consider what we do a public service. So it's free to sign up, free to record. You always get a copy no matter what. And then you choose if you want to share it with StoryCorps and have it archived and have it shared with our radio partner. But it's not required at all.
When I was thinking about what's been unique about Columbia so far, a lot of them have been these like intergenerational conversations. Like the other day I had this trio come in that were mother, daughter, and grandmother, and they talked about like their great-grandmother too, and these generations that had come before them. And I think that's been really special to see, especially recording with folks who are older and who can pass down like the wisdom and lessons of generations before them, knowing that people who record will be able to share that with people who come after them. I think being able to bear witness to that process feels really special, and to know that whether or not people decide to archive it, that they'll have that recording to share with friends and family for generations.
It's not much more than a conversation, but I think the fact of that you're having the conversation like in this dedicated space and you're setting time aside in your day to have that conversation with someone just makes it more intentional, and so people end up feeling really grateful for the experience. Really, like our main goal, especially on the mobile team, is we just want people to enjoy themselves when they come in. People are always asking us, oh, did I do it right? Do you think my story was interesting? But we're like, it's about you. Like, as long as you enjoy yourself and you come in, you have a good time, that's what we care about.
You know, obviously we care about this work, and that's why we're here, and seeing that that's like reciprocated in this community, that's been really nice. I feel like a lot of people have left just feeling really excited about the experience and really excited to listen back to their recording soon, and excited to tell their friends about it. So that's been a nice welcome here.
The power of storytelling. Y'all, I have chills. And speaking of chills, I want to quickly talk about those who have given and why they gave. Patrick in Fort Mill, we thank you so much, and he's given because he values unbiased information. Bretta from Cameron, to get access to Passport. Love that honesty there. Richard from Campobello, because we enjoy listening and watching. It's that simple. Bruce from Kenton, Ohio, for the connection while we are traveling to South Carolina. That should make us all feel great. Yeah. Calvin in Conway, to keep people informed. Shout out to Conway. My husband's from Conway. And Carolyn in Columbia, I often watch PBS NewsHour and listen to NPR sometimes. It's important to have this objective information available for the public. So news is still wildly popular, Gavin.
That's why I have a job still.
That's why you have a job still.
The news does not stop.
It's
not in this state, especially.
Sometimes we want it to, right? Janie in Simpsonville, unprejudiced reporting and in-depth report. So kudos to you. With that, this evening we've showcased so many great shows, but there is always so much more. What can viewers look forward to next, Bradley?
Well, I think May and June are really just packed with, I think, things that will be favorites soon enough. You know, it's hard to narrow it down. People always ask me favorites. Well, who's your favorite composer, you know, when you're hosting the show, your favorite piece? And what a hard question when there's so much good content, so much good music and programs out there. But if I had to pick, I would say the Darius Rucker concert coming up. That might top the list. The 3-time Grammy Award winner is going to perform songs from his latest album, Carolyn's Boy, along with Hootie and the Blowfish classics, solo country hits, all taped live in Nashville just for PBS. So I didn't go to USC back in the 90s, so I didn't have that experience.
For you. For you.
Oh, you know, you're a bit too young for that, but I can have this experience now thanks to ETV, June 1st, 8:30 p.m. right here on this station. So mark your calendars, June 1st, for that wonderful concert, Darius Rucker from Nashville.
Yeah, and that'll be so much fun to watch. We love to look and see a local musician make it big, especially talking about Darius right there. And we've also got a new documentary, some new documentaries here at ETV, including A Town on Fire, premiering on May 15th at 9 p.m. It explores a tragic 1923 fire which consumed the Cleveland School located off Interstate 20 near Camden at Exit 101. It was a result of the fire and that large loss of life that the public outcry at the time focused attention on the issues of fire safety in places of assembly and pressured our elected leaders to enact legislation which began to shape building and fire codes not only in South Carolina but throughout the nation. So another local story from more than 100 years ago that had national ramifications. So again, some important work that our producers here at ETV are doing. You know, it's not just, you know, sounds and soundscapes. It's not just what you hear on NPR, South Carolina Public Radio, The Lead, This Week in South Carolina. We have a lot of folks working behind the scenes that you can't see right now that produce great Emmy Award-winning documentaries year in and year out. So they're always out there too. And that's why I want to thank some other folks who have also donated to ETV and the endowment, including Nancy from Pawleys Island. Who doesn't love Pawleys Island right there on the coast? I very much enjoy the programming on both SCETV and SC Public Radio. So you don't have to pick favorites. You can have both. 1-800-256-8535. Tell us which one you like the most, though. There's also Teresa in Spartanburg. Teresa's my mother's name, and she's a big PBS fan, but she does not donate, to which I give her a hard time. But she's in Maryland, so that's her problem. That's WEDA's problem, not ETV's problem.
You have Ohioans and North Carolinians donating.
Right,
and you know, I went to school in Ohio, so if you're a Kent State fan, give away Golden Flashes. And we also have Anna in Raleigh. Her mom listens every day, wants to wish her a happy birthday. Happy birthday to Anna's mom in Raleigh. And Dan in Beaufort. Happy to have found SC Public Radio after moving here from Philadelphia. Nothing like live, local public radio. And of course, our friend A.T. Shire, producer of the Lead podcast, is a big New Jersey fan, big Philadelphia Eagles fan. So I get my share of Philly fans.
Absolutely.
And we love Dan, so go Philly.
For me, I do think that I'm most excited about the new episode of Echoes and Insights. And that program breathes new life into a 1983 interview between our very own Beryl Dacres and Pulitzer Prize winner Toni Morrison. And South Carolina scholars, thought leaders, and Toni Morrison all are enthusiasts who engage and extend a thought-provoking dialogue that connects past and present. Once again, a show that only ETV could create.
I'm always just amazed sometimes that I grew up hearing about certain things that took place in South Carolina. Certain triumphs, maybe others are tragedies and terrible things, but there's kind of whispers of them and just the vague notions. And then later, I'm like, well, I knew nothing about this, but ETV is providing this resource where you can see this incredible interview with a literary great like Toni Morrison, or you can learn more about that Camden school fire, I think it was, that changed things nationally and maybe internationally with the way we approach safety. So it really is just an incredible resource that we have here, and something to kind of bring everything to your feet. And you have so many options Again, as I said, it's hard to pick what to go for, so why not just leave it on all the time? Well, as we close out tonight,
no commercials.
All the time, commercial light, if any at all. So it's really a good bet for you. But I want to thank everyone who's joined us in the studio, all of our viewers online and on TV, and of course, our wonderful donors who make all of this possible. People who are sustaining Stars for HAP with regular donations. Thank you so much. You can scan the QR code on your screen to join them. Visit scetv.org, or of course, that good old-fashioned phone number, 800-256-8535.
Absolutely. We are so grateful for your support. Whether it's a financial gift, a gift of your time and attention, engagement on social media, it's all so meaningful, and we appreciate you so very much. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And thank you again for all you do for SCETV and SC Public Radio. Good night.
This is ETV.